My name is Andrew Gradman. I'm a tax lawyer, law offices of Andrew Gradman. And today I'll be splitting this presentation with Rachel and Abraham to talk to you about how you can get free money from the IRS, basically, because there's a lot of ways that they've made available for that. We're going to focus on employment taxes. I'll touch briefly on the things we're not talking about because these are things you should think about. You've heard about the SBA loans. You've heard about employment impact payments to individuals. You should be thinking and talking with your CPA about whether you've had net operating losses in the past that you weren't able to use, whether you had interest that you maybe you were real estate and you couldn't use interest that was limited and now you can. For some of you, these may be opportunities to amend your tax returns, get refunds, and get money. But what I will talk about are two employment tax provisions in the CARES Act. The first is the delay of employment payroll taxes. And this relates to the fact that usually, as an employer, you need to deposit your employment taxes at least monthly, or else you will incur penalties. Under this new rule, this doesn't change how much tax you owe. This doesn't change the fact that you eventually have to pay those taxes. But for a portion of your payroll taxes attributable to wages in the 3 remaining quarters of 2020, this rule says you do not have to deposit them until much later. So I'll tell you how much tax and how much of a delay. The amount of tax is the 6.2% Social Security tax for employers, which is imposed on wages up to $137,000. It's also the equivalent amount for the self-employed. It does not affect the Medicare taxes, which are 3.8%. And then in terms of the delay, how much of a delay? Well, half of what you postpone is going to be due in 20 months, December 31st, 2021. The other half is due in 32 months, which is December 31st of 2022. And so really you should think about this as an interest-free loan from the federal government to the employers and self-employed. Depending how you define the denominator, I look at it as a loan of equal to 5.5% of your total wages plus payroll taxes that you incur for the next 3 quarters. And this applies to everyone with only one catch, which is really a trivial catch. The catch is that this deferral is not available for a taxpayer who had a PPP loan and had that loan forgiven. And it turns out that initially sounds harsh to PPP borrowers, but it's actually not that harsh because the IRS has clarified they only apply this once you get your loan forgiven. And I mean, I think that's almost arbitrarily generous because you could just delay. So up until you get the loan forgiven, you can delay your payments. But you could also delay getting your loan forgiven as long as you want. My understanding, my recollection is that the forgiveness of the PPP loans applies to both principal and interest. Someone should correct me if I've mistaken that, but I think that's correct. Meaning, why not just put off your deferral of your PPP loan until you're done deferring your employment taxes? So very liberal, very generous. This is very good for all of you. The next provision that I'll discuss does reduce the amount of taxes you owe. This is the employer retention credit. And I think it's helpful. Rachel and Abraham will talk about credits for sick leave wages and qualified family leave wages. And so I want to distinguish this because those credits are for when the employee or when the employee's family is sick or in need. I think of this credit as being triggered when the employer is sick. And I'll define that for you in a moment, but as a background, I just want to say this is a refundable credit. And a refundable credit is a very special thing because even though it's defined as a credit against employment taxes, it doesn't matter what it's a credit against because it's just free money. A refundable credit is free money. You just have to know how to earn it. So what do you do to earn this? Well, I think of this as a matching wage program for employers. The government will match a certain amount of wages that you pay on a dollar-for-dollar basis in order to help you, the sick employer, to retain your employees. So here are the limits for this. First, this is only available for the 3 remaining calendar quarters in 2020. Second, for any given employee, the government will only pay a total of $5,000 for all three of those quarters combined. Once you've, but yeah, once you pay more than 5,000 for those three quarters, you've maxed out what the government is going to get, what you're going to get. So just some simple math. If you have a $66,000 employee on a yearly basis, the numbers are going to work out. That's why it shows that number. Then for the remaining three quarters, he would expect 50,000. So okay, let's say in this instance you furlough him, but you continue paying him $5,000 total for the next three quarters. That's the optimal, the maximum number you would use under this credit. What that does is it keeps him above the poverty line. You exactly above the poverty line. You pay 5,000, the government matches 5,000. He gets his economic impact payment check, which is 1,200. That's 11,200 total. The poverty line I Googled is 12,760. So if assuming you paid him something in the first quarter of the year, he does have some other money. This is all structured, I think, to keep people just above the poverty line. FYI. Third limitation: if you happen to be paying an employee for emergency paid sick leave or for emergency family and medical leave, then the payments you make under those credits, which Rachel will describe, those payments won't get matched under this credit. And it's kind of obvious, but I want you to think of there being three separate buckets of money, because you can achieve all three credits. You get this credit, which is $5,000 from the government for retaining people. If people qualify for the family leave, you get up to $10,000 for the family leave for the same employee. If they also qualify for sick leave, you could get up to $5,000 for that credit. You know, if you have a very unlucky employee, they could get $20,000 of government money. Fourth limitation: not all employers are eligible. This is where I'm defining what I mean by a sick employer. You have two ways to qualify. One is that the employer had a, quote, significant, one of them is they had significant decline in income compared to the previous year. That's a 50% reduction in gross receipts on a year-over-year basis for the same quarter. The other is that the business was suspended in some way due to coronavirus. That is a little ambiguous. The statute refers to a full or partial shutdown due to orders from the appropriate governmental authority. I think here in California, we had Governor Newsom's order on March 19th, which defined a whole bunch of businesses as non-essential. Strikes me that those obviously qualify. If you are essential, you still may be in a situation where your customers aren't coming in, where your employees aren't comfortable coming in. And I'm not going to parse that here over this call, but I think it should be quite easy to qualify under that definition, but there are open questions. Fifth limitation: if the employer has more than 100 employees, this retention credit is only available to the extent you're paying furloughed employees. If they have less than 100 employees, it doesn't matter whether you've furloughed your employees. You can achieve this credit even for the people who are still coming into work, as long as you've qualified as a sick employer as defined above. And then the sixth, final, and I think most interesting restriction is that you're not eligible for this credit if you receive a PPP loan. That's different from what I said above for the delay. That's if you have the loan forgiven. If you receive a PPP loan, you can't get this credit. And I think of this in the context of Shake Shack. You know, on April 10th, they got a credit. On April 20th, they said, no, thanks, we don't want the credit. And they're saying it was because they're altruistic, which may be the case. But I wonder, if you did the math, how this math would play out. And I think there's a sense in which if you are an employer who knows you're going to fire a lot of people and you know you're going to cut a lot of wages, then for the PPP loan, you're not going to get a good forgiveness amount because it's sensitive to that. And so, you know, I would like to do the math if I could get access to the numbers. I wonder if it's actually rational for a company like Shake Shack to turn down the PPP loan and say, I'd rather qualify for the retention credit to the extent I do furlough employees, but I fired others. I don't know how the math is. So that is, before I hand this to Rachel, I'll just point something out, which is this. The delay says you don't have to pay your FICA taxes for a long time. The retention credit says that you can earn a credit against your FICA taxes. And now Rachel's going to describe some other credits, and you may wonder, why do I care about credits if I don't have to pay these taxes for 20 to 32 months? And so there are two responses to that. Response one is, these are refundable credits. So once you exceed the amount of tax you incurred, you're going to be making money. So that it eventually could help you. But the other response is, yes, that's a reasonable question. And I think to the extent you're not earning refundable credits, these incentives do kind of cross paths. It's a meaningful objection. And for example, if there's a larger employer who will continue to accrue a lot of employment taxes no matter what, that they're never going to achieve refundable credit status, then they're going to be somewhat indifferent from a liquidity standpoint to the credits because they've got the delay.
Tax breaks that we were discussing, the employment delay payroll and the reduced employee, now those are just delaying, correct? Paying the taxes now. We're just giving ourselves more time to do that through payroll at a later time. Am I correct?
The delay is a delay. So you're correct about that. The retention credit is not meant as a delay. That is a credit, which is Rachel, under the same framework Rachel pointed out. There's that form 7200. So if you start obtaining credits which exceed the amount of taxes you'd otherwise owe, now you're in a position, and I don't know how far in advance you file it when you anticipate earning those credits. I don't know that. Maybe Rachel should say that, but you can get the money back promptly.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
but
Rachel
these two programs are not available if the company applied for a loan, correct? For the PPL.
The retention credit is not available if you applied for a loan. So it's one if you obtained a loan. They're not going to penalize you for applying. A lot of people didn't get those loans, and those people are penalized in no way.
Okay.
The retention credit is not available if you obtained a loan, and then the delay ceases to be available once you get notice of forgiveness of your loan, PPP loan.
Got it. Okay, thank you very much.